Hi, I'm Weihua. I'm a PhD student from Stanford. I'm excited to talk about our advances in graph neural networks on expressive power, pre-training, and open graph benchmark. First, I'd like to start by saying that graphs are everywhere. Many real-world objects can be naturally represented as graphs, like molecular graphs, social networks, biological networks, and so on. We are interested in performing machine learning tasks over these graphs, such as predicting the properties of molecules or predicting new friendship in social networks. To do this, we need to obtain good representation of graphs. The goal of graph representation learning is to map nodes and graphs to embedding space such that similar nodes or graphs are mapped into similar vectors. Graph neural networks, or GNNs, are a promising approach to graph representation learning. Given a graph, GNNs iteratively aggregate neighboring information to obtain node embeddings, and then pool the node embeddings to obtain the embedding of the entire graph. Notice that the neighbor aggregation and the pooling are modeled by neural networks, whose parameters are learned in an end-to-end fashion to predict the given labels. GNNs have been giving promising results in many application domains and tasks, and there have been increasing interest from the academic community. In fact, the most growing keyword in the last iClear was graph neural networks. There has been lots of research advance in graph neural networks. Here, I would like to talk about our theoretical and application advances. In terms of the theoretical advance, in our paper called How Powerful Are Graph Neural Networks, we built one of the first theoretical frameworks to analyze graph structure that can and cannot be distinguished by GNNs. This is a practically relevant problem in graph classification because in order to classify different graphs, we need to map them into different embeddings in the first place. So how do GNNs tell that the two different graphs shown here are indeed different? Our key insight is that GNNs distinguish different graphs by using different computational graphs to compute node embeddings. Here, each layer in the computational graph corresponds to one layer of neighbor aggregation, and the gray boxes of computational graph represent neural networks used for aggregating the neighbor information. As you can see here, nodes with different neighboring structure are associated with different computational graphs, which could potentially allow GNNs to distinguish different graph structure. Therefore, the key to allow GNNs to distinguish as many graphs as possible or to have maximum expressive power is to design neural network neighbor aggregators that can fully retain neighboring information. In other words, the expressive power of a GNN is determined by that of the neural network aggregation function the GNN uses. The more expressive the aggregation function is, the more expressive the resulting GNNs becomes. This insight leads us to develop a GNN architecture called Graph Isomorphism Network, or GIN in short, which uses most expressive neighbor aggregation function and is theoretically shown to be the most expressive GNNs. We also show that many existing GNNs do not use the expressive neighbor aggregation function and therefore fail to distinguish many basic graph structure, such as the difference in node degrees. Interestingly, our GIN is closely related to a well-known graph isomorphism test called Wechsler-Lehrman test, or WL test, that is proposed about half a century ago. The WL test is known to be able to distinguish most of real-world graphs, which implies that our GIN is expressive enough for practical use in graph classification. Now, expressive power is certainly important, but our eventual goal of graph machine learning is to improve generalization performance on unseen test graphs. This is especially challenging in scientific applications, such as molecular property prediction, where given a molecular graph, we want to predict its chemical properties. The challenges in applying GNNs to scientific discovery are twofold. First, we often only have small number of labeled data because collecting labels often involves expensive lab experiments and therefore very costly. Second, the problem of scientific discovery is inherently about out-of-distribution prediction, meaning that we need to apply our model to make prediction on test graphs that are structurally very different from training graphs. Here, we aim to resolve both of these challenges by pre-training GNNs. That is, we inject domain knowledge into GNNs through pre-training before they are fine-tuned on downstream tasks. The question is, what are the effective strategies for pre-training GNNs? As shown in the figure, our key idea is to pre-train both node and graph embeddings, not just one of them. Our intuition is that we want GNNs to capture domain knowledge not only at the level of the entire graph, but also at the level of individual nodes. Obtaining meaningful node embeddings is important because they will be directly used to obtain the embedding of the entire graph that is then used for making prediction. Our overall pre-training strategy is shown here. At high level, our strategy consists of 3 steps. First, we perform node-level pre-training using unlabeled data. Second, we perform graph-level supervised pre-training on labeled data. Finally, we fine-tune the pre-trained GNNs on downstream tasks of interest. We propose concrete methods for each of the 3 steps in the paper, and please refer to it if you are interested. We use the gene architecture for pre-training because it is the most expressive GNN and therefore can absorb as much domain knowledge as possible during pre-training. In fact, in our experiments, we found that the expressive gene architecture benefits more from pre-training compared to less expressive GNN architecture. We evaluate our pre-training strategy on a diverse set of downstream molecular classification datasets. The figure here shows the relative improvement of ROC AUC score compared to non-pre-trained baseline, which is shown as the purple line in the figure. First, we see from the orange dots that the naive strategy that pre-trains GNNs only at the level of the entire graph is not effective, and it even performs worse than non-pre-trained baseline in 2 datasets. On the other hand, we see from the green dots that our strategy that pre-trains GNNs at the level of both individual nodes and the entire graph works really well and significantly outperforms both non-pre-trained baseline and the naive pre-training strategy. So I have talked about our advances in GNNs on expressive power and pre-training. There are also lots of great work from other groups, and the interest in graph ML is likely to continue to increase. The fundamental question is, how can we further advance the research field of graph ML? Historically, high-quality datasets have played important roles in advancing research fields, as exemplified by ImageNet and MS-COCO in computer vision, SQuAD and GLUE benchmark in natural language processing. To properly track progress and identify issues with current approaches, it is critical for the community to develop diverse, challenging, and realistic benchmark datasets for machine learning on graphs. However, if we look at the currently used graph datasets, they're really problematic. The most obvious issue is that the dataset sizes are extremely small. For example, the most commonly used node classification datasets, Cora and Sightseer, only contain a few thousand nodes. And the widely used graph classification dataset, MUTAG, only contains less than 200 molecular graphs. To be more specific, the issues are threefold. First, as I mentioned before, the current datasets are too small to be realistic, and the small dataset size also prevents us from rigorous comparison of model performance. Second, the evaluation protocol is not unified. Every paper uses its own training validation test splits and evaluation metrics. As a result, performance across papers are not comparable. Finally, dataset splits often follow conventional random splits, which is unrealistic for real-world applications. The model accuracies tend to be over-optimistic under the conventional random splits. To address these challenges, here we present Open Graph Benchmark, OGB in short, which is a collection of large-scale, realistic, and diverse benchmark datasets for machine learning on graphs. OGB datasets are diverse in task categories, domains, and dataset scales. In terms of task categories, we have included 3 fundamental graph machine learning tasks: node classification, link prediction, and graph classification. In terms of domains, we have included graphs from natural science domains such as chemistry and biology, as well as social and information networks and knowledge graphs. In terms of dataset scale, we have small-scale graphs with around 100,000 nodes to medium-scale graphs with a few million nodes, up to large-scale graphs with more than 100 million nodes. The small-scale graphs can be used to test sophisticated yet computationally intensive models, while the large-scale graphs can be used to test scalable models. Our graph datasets also exhibits diversity in graph structure. This table summarizes the basic graph statistics of the currently available 5 node classification datasets. As you can see, some graphs are extremely denser than the others, while others are more clustered and have larger graph diameters. The difference in graph structure can affect how information propagates in the graphs, which in turn can affect the performance of many graph ML models, such as GNNs and random walk-based node embedding models. Therefore, our collection of diverse OGB datasets are suitable to test versatility of graph ML models applied to different kinds of graph structure. Another problem we address in OGB is the conventional random splits. Currently, prediction accuracies on graph benchmarks are saturating. Generalization gap is quite small once we have enough labeled data. However, random data splits are not realistic and fail to represent what one would expect in real-world settings. As a result, the model that performs well in random split settings may not perform well in practice. We really need meaningful data splits that reflect real-world applications. To address this, in OGB, we provide application-specific data split for each dataset. For example, in molecule classification, we adopt scaffold split, in which molecules are first clustered according to their scaffold structure, and the obtained clusters are then split into training, validation, and test sets. This split scheme aligns well with the realistic drug discovery application scenario, where we need to make prediction on test molecules that are structurally very different from training molecules. As another example, in knowledge graph completion task, we use time split, in which we use triplets until a certain timestamp as training and validation sets, and use newly added triplets as test set. Overall, we have 15 datasets currently available in OGB, covering diverse tasks, domains, and scales. We are also open to suggestions from the community about the datasets to include. In our paper, we additionally performed extensive baseline experiments for each dataset and discussed research challenges and opportunities. We especially highlight the challenges of developing graph ML models that are scalable to large graphs and generalizable under the realistic dataset split. So far, I've talked about the dataset provided on OGB. OGB actually provides the end-to-end pipeline for graph ML research, as shown at the bottom. Specifically, in OGB, we provide the graph datasets that cover the key task categories. We then provide data loaders that automatically downloads, processes, and splits the dataset, and is compatible to Python geometric and DGL. Then you can concentrate on building your models. To evaluate the model performance, we prepare the unified evaluation scripts. Finally, we have public leaderboards to keep track of state-of-the-art results. The entire research pipeline is managed by our pip installable Python package. With our package, you can get the dataset, split them, evaluate your model performance in a few lines of code, as demonstrated in the code snippets. To sum up, OGB is a great resource for graph ML problems, and we envision OGB to be common community-driven platform for graph machine learning research, as well as teaching resource. Thank you for listening, and thanks for my collaborators and mentors listed here. Thank you.